This is my latest piece of work. It's called Back to Normalism. Back to Normalism was a term I initially started using to try my best to characterise what I could call a post-Covid moment, post-Covid culture. It's kind of first off a depiction of what it feels like to be in a society where we have more or less tried to attach our post-Covid moment to a pre-Covid moment, and it's been almost cut and paste, and it seems to have produced something what feels like a collective jet lag. But it's more than that, this use of term. I wanted to make something that expresses living in a moment where superficially everything feels to be working right. Everyone looks fit and well if you're able to ghost the destitute on the streets, but there's a lingering sense of being haunted by the spectre of being subjectively fucked up in a world that feels somehow fucked up. And yeah, sorry, I can't find more appropriate words than that. Largely because at the intersection of self and society, a sense of direction, a sense of meaning making feels to have broken down. And I have to go into this now from a perspective of personal struggles, because even if it dumps me in the outsider artist camp as opposed to the professional practitioner, as my work always feels to be defined by two main underlying and interlocking themes, because I visually and verbally disclose about my own struggles quite frequently, and the work has always been about the near maddening struggle to discern the inside from the outside regarding the self, specifically regarding depressed states of view on contemporary life, and how I've often felt to be accused to be projecting a sort of a subjective view, and I've always battled back against that, I feel. But there's also in my work there's a deep sense regarding the grey area between free will, what you could call the ability to act from a sense of decision making for the most beneficial outcome, and causality, as in the outcome of lives being determined by external causes that are much bigger than us. So my work assumes its form. It does, because I admit I've had a lifelong struggle to locate my own desire to become myself from compulsive obsessive behaviour, which ultimately got me questioning the nature of individual power, agency and free will in relation to living in a world made up of social and environmental forces that are much bigger than us. But nonetheless, this work is still fundamentally about what I'd call the senility of Britain, which seems to be getting more intense at every successive crisis since the 2008 financial crash, but most pronounced since COVID-19. And I feel that at least the majority of people in the country are anxious and share this sort of anxiety about this, perhaps secretly, privately, about where we are heading. The larger concept of a back to normal, which will likely take the shape of an entire exhibition earlier next year, is that perhaps globally, but specifically in the UK, we have been perpetually trying to return to a perceived place of safety and normality, which I believe we see as being located in the time between, say, 1990 and 2008, when a period of overall political and economic stability, a time based around the triad of work, shop and play, felt like it could last forever, and was by and large, even if you didn't like it, a functioning grand narrative. But since this, what I feel, broke down in 2008, the lack of a cohesive and unifying story strong enough to replace it has led to a compulsion at the point of every successive and increasingly more frequent crisis to get back to that normal. And I just think it's pushed our culture and politics and economic strategies into the realm of almost a deranged, meanwhile subtly altering the subjective states and intensifying as private struggles. The post-Covid back to normalism has been the most severe, I think, because it's almost been like a blackout for the social body, which feeling disassembled then like reassembled, cut and paste. It feels like a bodged job, like inhabiting Frankenstein's monster. I guess I'm trying to describe this moment, which is inherently hard because it feels like being inside a collective madness, which leaves you to kind of think, whoa, when do you come out of that point, and how? But on a final note, to be perhaps accused of being esoteric, being honest about this lived-in personal struggle aspect of being a working artist, alongside them making larger societal statements, I guess, has historically created a lot of paranoia, as I've always felt like there's always threat of being accused. And in an age where the spotlight is very much on mental health and addiction, we applaud recovery journeys. The narrative is always about I pulled myself through it or I'm recovering. I get this and the need for it, and it's no bad thing. But sometimes it becomes a reflection on a cultural obsession with self-actualisation, finding our best selves, and there's kind of a puritanical quality to that. But I also find it reductive to the idea of the self, primarily because once we start talking about ourselves in relation to the bigger world, that conversation just becomes more difficult. And how to define as destiny in it, but I just feel it's essential. And I'm not saying that I have no hope as well in finding myself in a better space. Of course I do, but I've decided that I'm not gonna keep my mouth shut for fear of comments telling me I'm deluded about the state of things, because it's all in me depressed outlook or whatever people want to call it. And I'm not going to stop speaking about the intersection of self and society, inside and outside, because it's the furnace from where my life as a working artist were born. It's just literally what fuels it, and that's been the story so far, and it's been about a lived in, not yet overcome. And I'm not saying I want that to be indefinite for any kind of way, but I'm not going to apologise for the work I make in the meantime.